This story is about Chris Watts, the man who wiped out his entire family just to be with his mistress. Chris was living in Frederick, Colorado. He married his wife Shanann back in 2012, and she was this bright, outgoing, very sociable person. They had two beautiful girls, Bella and Celeste, and there was a baby boy on the way as well. They lived in a nice, quiet, and cozy neighborhood. Now, Shanann would often share glowing family moments with smiling photos and loving captions on Facebook. On the surface, Chris seemed like the perfect husband and father. They had this image of a very happy household. But behind the cameras, there were cracks that the world could not see. While Shanann was pouring her heart and her soul into the marriage, Chris was busy living a double life. He started a relationship with his colleague Nicole Kessinger, and what started as flirtation turned into a secret relationship that quickly grew into an obsession for Chris. As his relationship with Nicole progressed, his marriage suffered, and Chris wanted freedom from that life. He wanted a fresh start with Nicole. But instead of seeking divorce like a normal person, he had darker plans. His loving family that was once his pride and joy now felt like obstacles for him. And in his very twisted mind, he started to nurture the idea of erasing them permanently. On August 13th, 2018, Shanann had returned home from a business trip around 2 a.m. Her friend Nicole Atkinson had dropped her off. The next morning, Nicole became very concerned and worried when her friend Shanann missed a gynecology appointment and also failed to return her text messages. This was very unlike Shanann, and Nicole went to her house to check on her. When she got there, she rang the doorbell, she knocked the door, but there was no answer. She called Chris, who was at work, and she also called the police. When the police arrived, they conducted a welfare check, but Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were nowhere to be found. Shanann's car was still in the house. Her purse, her keys, her medication, and her wedding ring were all also in the house. Chris insisted he had no idea where they were. He even stood before TV cameras, begging for their safe return. But something about his demeanor seemed very off. His body language was strange, he had this weird look on his face, and he even smirked a few times. This left a very bad taste for viewers. His neighbor's surveillance camera had captured Chris's truck backing into their house the night before. His stories weren't adding up at all, so the investigators put him on a polygraph test and Chris failed with flying colors. The investigators mounted pressure on him and he finally broke. But initially, he tried to shift the blame to Shanann. He claimed Shanann unalived the girls and he just reacted. But the overwhelming evidence told a very different story. Chris finally admitted to the unthinkable and he confessed about what had happened the night before. He said they argued. Shanann wanted to save the marriage, but Chris wanted out. Unfortunately, his decision wasn't just about leaving. It was about erasing them forever. Chris went on to confess that he strangled 15 weeks pregnant Shanann in their bedroom while their daughter slept just down the hall. Sadly, the horror didn't end there. Chris carried Shanann's body to his truck. He placed Bella and Celeste beside their mother's body. The poor girls must have known something was terribly wrong. He then drove them to a remote oil site, and when they got there, he dug a shallow grave and buried Shanann. And then he turned to his girls. First, he smothered 3-year-old Celeste and then turned to 4-year-old Bella, who begged her father for her life, saying, "Daddy, no." But this man, who was supposed to be her protector, smothered her too.
My daddy is a hero.
Chris then forced their tiny little bodies into the crude oil tanks, breaking their bones to make them fit through the small hatch. The investigators even found a tuft of blonde hair on the edge of one of the hatches. On August 15th, just days after his desperate TV appeal, Chris was finally arrested. The charges were multiple counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, and tampering with the body. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he pled guilty only to avoid the death penalty. He was then sentenced to consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Chris sits in a Wisconsin prison today, and he would never walk free again. This case shocked the whole world because it wasn't a story of a hardened criminal or some stranger in the night. It was a father, a husband, a man who was supposed to be the protector of the very people he erased from the world. So do you believe that Chris snapped in the moment, or do you think that this was just premeditated? Do you believe evil like this is born or made? Please share your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, share to enable me to continue to bring these stories to life.